I like the way it like rains really hard and then 5 minutes later there's no rain at all. It's not something I'm used to, but it's pretty cool. Um, Hello, my name is Greg Neagle. I'm going to talk today about the past, present, and future of Munki. Before I begin, I just want a quick shout out, thank the great folks at Fleet for making it possible for me to even be here today. So thank you very much, Fleet. And there was your commercial for today's presentation. In case you are unfamiliar with Munki, which I guess if you came here, you're probably not, but I think at least I need to do a tiny little introduction. Munki is a management tool, a software management tool for macOS. And it allows you to install software, keep it updated, and even remove software on your fleet of Macs. And it features a really great looking App Store-like user interface. It's been around for almost 15 years now. And it hasn't always been quite as polished or full-featured as it is today. Let's take a look at Munki's past. As you might know, I work for Walt Disney Animation Studios in Burbank, California. And I started Disney Animation in 2001. So you can do the math. I've been there a long time. This was a typical Mac we used when I first started there. And it ran Mac OS 9. And we were using FileWave to manage our Mac OS 9 Macs. And that is not what the FileWave logo looked like back then. A lot less corporate designy, huh? But back when we were ready to move to Mac OS 10, which came out in 2001, FileWave did not yet have a product that worked on Mac OS 10. So I looked for an alternative. I had been hanging out on the Mac Enterprise mailing list, which is a mailing list hosted by the fine folks here at Penn State University. And it was the equivalent of the Mac admin Slack of its day. And that's where all the Mac admins would hang out and swap ideas and talk about stuff. And people were talking about this tool called RadMind. And some university lab administrators were using it to manage their Mac OS lab machines. And so, hey, it's open source. So that meant I could download it, play around with it, and I wouldn't have to spend a bunch of money. So that was a good thing. And RadMind was really my first hands-on real experience with open source software on the Unix platform. And it was also my first real experience with third-party tools that embraced the Unix philosophy. Because I'd been using classic Mac OS for 10 years before that. And so I was just starting to learn the Unixy ways of doing things. I didn't know much about the command line. I didn't know much about standard in and standard out pipes and all this fun stuff that we all kind of take for granted now, because we've had to learn at least some Unix concepts to work with Mac OS 10. But this just opened my eyes to just the power and the appeal of the Unix way of doing things. And if you look at the list here where it says the Unix philosophy, you look at that list and you think, that's not that amazing. But if you think about what software was like on the Mac in 2001, this was revolutionary. I was used to using these commercial tools that were essentially black boxes. You didn't know what was going on inside them. And if they didn't behave the way you expected, if you had some problem, you had no way really to look at it and see what was going on. You had to open a support request with the vendor and hope for the best. And with RadMind, this is one of the very first times I could just look under the hood and see what was going on. I mean, it output what it was doing in text. You could read the source code. And most importantly, again, this is not something you get very often with commercial vendors, you could talk directly to the developers. You could talk directly to the people writing the code. There was no layers of indirection between you and the developers. And I mention all this because many of the things about RadMind influenced the design of Munki. And RadMind served us really well for several years. It took us all the way from Mac OS 10.2 to 10.4, I think. Maybe even 10.5. Yeah, I think we even used it for a bit on 10.5. And we were actually able to install software, remove software, keep it up to date. We even were able to do OS upgrades with RadMind. But Mac OS 10 itself was changing and making things a little bit more difficult to use with RadMind. But more importantly, our needs were changing. We were hiring more developers that were writing code on the Mac. When I first started, almost no laptops. Everything was a desktop machine. As we started moving more towards laptops and that sort of thing, it just didn't fit. The way RadMind managed machines just did not fit with where we were going with Mac OS 10. So by 2008, it became pretty clear to me that we needed a replacement for RadMind. And I went and I looked at other open source tools and really didn't find anything that worked. And I looked at some commercial tools, and I heard about this thing called the Casper Suite, and it sounded pretty interesting, and I thought I should probably look into that. But I'd made a really key error. I came to the conclusion that we needed a new replacement way too late in the budget cycle. There was no possible way I was going to get funding to buy anything for at least a year, probably longer. Because this was like in the summer, the new fiscal year starts in October, but the budget cycle starts in the spring. It was not going to happen. So what the heck am I going to do? Meanwhile, our studio has used and continues to use a lot of Python. It's the scripting language that is best supported in the visual effects and digital animation industries because it works with the third-party software that's commonly used in those workflows. But in the early 2000s, the most common systems administration type languages were like shell scripting, like Bash, or even Perl. And on the Mac, the most common scripting language was AppleScript, right? So I didn't know Python. I had no experience with it at all. I had heard one weird thing about Python, though, that indentation and white space was like super important, and that if you got the indentation wrong, your program wouldn't run at all. And I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. Why would you design anything like that? But my manager had asked me and our team to start learning Python, because the rest of the studio used Python a lot. He wanted us to also learn Python and sort of transition to using that for our systems administration tasks. Transitioning away from Perl. There was a lot of Perl. Did anybody write Perl in the past? Can you read what you wrote back then? Perl is a write-only language, I swear. So I had to learn Python. And the only way I can learn a new computer language is by building something with it. I have to have a project. I can't just look at a book and read the source code. It makes no, it just doesn't stick. I have to start trying to build something with it and run into problems and figure out, what that syntax actually means. I can read a textbook definition of it and it doesn't work for me. I just have to see it in action. So, Disney Animation needs a new management tool. I need to learn Python. So of course, I decided to take a shot at building something to manage our software using Python. I started experimenting and playing. I figured out how to get Python to run external processes like the Apple's command line installer. I figured out how to get information out of packages and disk images. I learned how to use Python's data structures. I'd never really worked with dictionaries before, and fell in love with dictionaries once I started encountering those in Python. And I don't have any of the very first Python experiments I work with, but this is code very, very early in the Munki development process. It dates back to like November of 2008. So I have receipts. Munki is close to 15 years old in that way. And while I was doing the early work on what would become Munki, I was busy chatting with other systems administrators at other organizations, sometimes through the Mac Enterprise mailing list and certainly other ways. And just bouncing off ideas and trying to figure out, what people would want such a tool to do. And I went to Macworld San Francisco in January of 2009, and I started talking to Nigel Kirsten. And I was chatting with him, and he was really, really supportive of the idea. He's like, oh, this sounds like a fantastic idea. And what you should do is you should make it open source. You should put it out on Google Code, and you should start a Google group so people can discuss it. I guess it's not really surprising that Nigel would have recommended that specifically because he worked for Google at the time, and he was managing their Mac fleet at that time. But before I could make a Google Code site or make a Google group, I had to come up with a name for the project. You have to have a name, even if it's a placeholder. And I don't know what made me think of this name. I don't know how I came up with it. I just remember that it sounded kind of fun, and it evoked helper monkeys. Right? You had your little group of helper monkeys that go around and help you do stuff. So I'm going to tell you how I convinced the powers that be at Disney Animation that I could release Munki as open source. I went into my manager, same guy that told me that I needed to learn Python, And I said, I am working on this software management tool for Mac OS, written in Python, and I want to make it open source. And he said, okay. That was the entire conversation. If I wanted to do that today, weeks, months of meetings, legal would get involved, there would be all of this back and forth. It would be such a hassle. I can't even really imagine doing it today, but it was good that we were all ignorant back then, and we just thought, just say yes, that's good enough. It's sort of the, ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission, because neither my manager or I knew that there should be anything more, deeper than just, do it. But I took Nigel's advice. I created a Google code site, started a Munki dev mailing list for Munki. Here's the first post to that Munki dev mailing list back in January of 2009. And the URL for the original Google code site still works. There's not anything interesting there anymore. It just points to the GitHub site, but it still exists. And then I went on the Internet Wayback Machine, and I couldn't find the first year of the site still archived, but this is like March 2010. And that's what it looked like back then. And there were people already starting to help and contribute. And you can see Nigel was one of the people contributing. Down at the bottom, you'll see Patrick McNeil. And Patrick was one of the Radmine developers at the University of Michigan in the early 2000s. So we're bringing it a little back circular here. And since we're talking about Radmine again, and I told you that Radmine influenced the design of Munki, let's look at some of those influences. I mean, obviously, like Radmine, Munki is open source software. There's one big influence right there. I really liked working with the Radmine community. Being able to talk to the developers, being able to directly chat with other people that were using Radmine, and we would share solutions and we'd share ways to do things. And I was hoping to create something similar with a Munki community. And I tried to embrace the Unix philosophy, small tools that do one thing, that take text as input and text back as output, and that write to text log files. But one of the most important influences was the idea of desired state. Radmine basically worked by managing the desired state of the file system. You would describe how you expected a part of the file system to look, and it would ensure that the file system looked like that. And that, as a side effect, installed software and removed software, because if it looks at the file system and says, hey, the applications folder is supposed to have a Firefox application and it doesn't, okay, I'm going to fix that by putting a Firefox application there. You've just installed software by remediating the file system to a known state. And I really like the idea of desired state, where you could just kind of define what you wanted and let the individual clients figure out how to get there. And more importantly, if a user changed it, the system would figure out how to put it back without you having to tell it again. And I find that a much more scalable and better approach than the approach I call find and do, which is something you see very often with other management tools, where you have some sort of like database of information about all of your clients, and then you have to like do a query to find machines that are in the state that you don't like, and then you have to send some command or do something to that group of machines to get it back into the state that you want. And then if those machines change, you have to do that query again and do it again. It's more hands-on. There's more places that you can mess up. It just feels more tedious to me. Being able to define what you want and let the clients kind of ensure that going forward, I think, is a really, really powerful way to do things. And so Munki, having some sort of desired state or close to desired state thing in Munki was really important to me. And there was also at least one thing about Radmine that influenced me the opposite direction. It was something I absolutely did not want to do, and that was the way you installed software. If you had used Radmine in the past, here's how you got software into the system. You would get the file system to a known state by running Radmine and getting it to that state. Then you would install the new software. You could just do it manually, double-click a package or run something from Adobe that wasn't a package. And once that was done, you would run a tool that scanned the file system and found the changes that had just happened. And then you would take that transcript of changes and you'd go through it and you'd take stuff out of it that you knew shouldn't be there. Of course, that required you knowing a little bit so that you knew which things shouldn't be in there. And once you were happy with that, you could then upload that transcript of changes and the files that were needed to the server. So kind of tedious, kind of complex, but the good thing about it is that it worked with any type of installer. It didn't matter what the vendor sent you. You know, we all love it when vendors provide Apple packages, but this thing didn't matter. You could just manually copy files. You could run some weird, you know, stuff-it-based installer. I think there were still some of those back then. Anything, any kind of installer, even Adobe installers. And so that was, you know, that was definitely a pro, but there's a lot of cons. And you were essentially repackaging everything. Every single piece of software that you wanted to get into RadMind, you were essentially repackaging it. And you could not guarantee that what you did actually accurately replicated what the vendor's installer did. It was more of a best guess because, you know, you did the install and then you scanned for changes and you just hope you found all the changes and you hope you didn't remove stuff out of the transcript that actually needed to be there. And so since you couldn't do that, that could lead to support issues with vendors. And I'll give you a really good example, Adobe. I'm pretty sure it was Adobe Photoshop. We were having some odd problem with it. I actually don't remember. Maybe it was a crashing problem or it just crashed all the time. And we contacted Adobe and we were trying to work through the issues. And during the conversation, it came out that, you know, we were installing it using RadMind. And they were like, what? And, you know, we explained what that was, and they're like, how about you take a new machine, install Photoshop with our installer, and see if you can reproduce the issue. And we couldn't. And it turned out, obviously, that the RadMind load set had missed something, and it was not completely replicating what Adobe's installer was doing. And so, you know, if you multiply that by all the vendors and all the products you have, that's some risk that you're taking on, that basically you now can't get support from the vendors because you're doing your own thing. So it was really important when I was designing Munki that as much as possible you do not repackage. Repackaging is considered bad in my view. And so I wanted Munki to work with the common formats. It definitely should, you know, work with packages, disk images, Apple's installer, and there's a lot of custom code in there for dealing with Adobe installers and that sort of thing, so that to avoid the need for repackaging. And another way Munki was not influenced by RadMind is written in C. I was told I needed to learn Python, so I wrote Munki in Python. The first Google code commit in early January 2009 had eight Python files and about 2,000 lines of Python code. That's kind of changed over the years. Right now, there's almost 100 individual Python files and 31,000 lines of Python code. And it's not all Python. Other languages have snuck in over the years. And according to GitHub, this is what it thinks about the current distribution of languages. The core Munki tools are still Python. The build scripts account for that little bit of shell. The Managed Software Center application accounts for the Swift and the CSS and the HTML and the JavaScript and the Objective-C, at least most of the Objective-C. So you know, I not only had to learn Python, but eventually I had to learn a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. I always learned just enough to get the task done, and then I would immediately forget it all. So there's a little bit of Objective-C that is not counted in the Managed Software Center. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. So speaking of Managed Software Center, let's take a look at how Munki's GUI has evolved over the years. The earliest releases of Munki included a GUI app named Managed Software Update. And it was built to look like the software update application that shipped with Mac OS at that time. You know, that if you use Mac OS back in the Snow Leopard or earlier days, that's what the software update application looked like. And so people knew how to use it, so it made sense to kind of pattern Munki's GUI after that as well. But optional software was added later sort of as an afterthought. It was hidden by default. You had to click that optional software button to bring it up. And it was pretty unintuitive to use. You installed by clicking checkboxes. I mean, it was the only way you could figure out how to kind of cram that into the software update style interface. But Munki 2, which was released in the fall of 2014, complete visual redesign. Completely rethought even how it looked, how it worked, and the thought process behind it. And absolutely blatantly ripped off the look of Apple's App Store application that shipped with macOS Lion. And optional software was brought front and center. That was the first thing you see when you launch the application. So instead of it being hidden and hard to discover, that's the first thing you see. It became much, much more important. And in the spring of 2016, Munki 2.6, just a little visual tweak, made it look a little bit more like the Mac App Store that was introduced in Yosemite. In Munki 3.6, which is in the spring of 2019, complete rewrite in Swift. The previous versions had been written in PyObjective-C, and if you're not familiar with PyObjective-C, that's sort of a bridge between Python and Apple's Cocoa frameworks, and it enables you to write a GUI application using mostly Python. But for this, we completely rewrote it from the ground up in Swift. So no visual changes, underneath everything changed. And then in the fall of 2020, for Munki 5.2, yet another redesign to more resemble the current version of the App Store, which was introduced in Big Sur, I believe. Most of this work was actually done by a gentleman in Switzerland named Steve Kung. Over the years, Munki has also been adopted as a component of several commercial management tools. Centrify started work on an integration with Munki in 2016. Peter, I remember having a conversation with him on this very topic, sitting in a Penn State University bus as we were going, I don't know, to the creamery or some barbecue thing on there. And then about a year later, they shipped it, and they did a presentation here at Penn State Mac Admins, introducing their integration of Munki inside their product. Also in that same year, 2017, AirWatch announced that they were going to be including Munki in their product. And that's now called VMware Workspace ONE UEM. I still call it AirWatch because it's shorter. But they've been shipping Munki as part of their Mac tool set now for a few years. Simple MDM also includes a Munki implementation. And they've done a really, really nice job with it because their implementation can use auto-package Munki recipes without modification. They've changed almost nothing about their implementation, and you can just use existing auto-package Munki recipes. And at least one other vendor has included Munki in their offerings for macOS. There might be others. In fact, there is one more, which I will mention later. Now, some of these commercial vendors have contributed back to Munki. Others, not so much. So let's switch topics a little bit and talk about contributions. Now, a key reason I wanted to make Munki open source was so that I could work with a larger community of Mac admins and bounce ideas off them and get help testing it and that sort of thing. Where I work, I don't have a huge number of additional Mac admins to bounce ideas off. It's mostly me. There's some other people who do a little bit of stuff in the but we're primarily a Linux shop. So we've got a lot of Linux expertise. There's some people working a little bit on Windows, and there's some people working on the Mac, but there wasn't like a community of people I could talk with. So it was really important, and one of the key things about getting into open source is so that I could trick other people into helping me build this. So let's look at some of the tricks that I've done here. Like when I was first developing Munki, the server and all the clients were in a single building. Disney Animation Studios was and pretty much still is a single building. And so everybody was in that building. Our network was an internal network with firewalls all around it, that sort of thing. So I didn't use client authentication at all. If you were in the building, you could get to the Munki repo. There was no need to do any sort of client authentication. Not everybody can get away with that. Brian Warsing, who at the time worked for Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, that was not something he was happy about. He really wanted to make sure, since he worked for a public university, and those of you who work in education know that there are these chaos monkeys known as students that just love to break things and get to things that they're not supposed to get to. It was very important for him that only authorized clients could reach his Munki repo. So he designed and built the first support for client certificate-based authentication in Munki. He wrote, tested, contributed the code, and really importantly, wrote the documentation as well. Another example, Munki originally used Python 2's URL lib libraries to talk to web servers, and they were really hard to work with, and they didn't work really well with HTTPS, a lot of problems there. So we switched to Apple's included curl binary, just called out to that to talk to web servers. And over time, that became problematic. And you could work around it by downloading a different version of curl and installing it and then telling Munki to use that different version of curl. But that was a real hassle that, to tell people that wanted to use Munki that not only did they have to download and install Munki, but they had to go download and install a different curl and put that in. I didn't like that. I wanted a solution where people could just download and install the Munki stuff and it would just work. So Michael Lin suggested using Apple's NSURL connection, which is something in their Cocoa frameworks that handles, you can talk to web URLs. And he was really of great help on figuring out how to get Munki, which is written mostly in Python, to talk to Apple's frameworks, Cocoa frameworks, Objective-C, using PyObject-C. There was some tricks that had to be done, some just little adjustments. And if you don't know Frogger or Michael, he's actually here at the conference today. Very knowledgeable about Python, very easy to nerd snipe into anything that has to do with Python. But he's been very helpful over the years in figuring out tough problems with Python and PyObject-C, a great partner. Yet another example. In the early days of Munki, most Munki admins hosted their Munki server on an internal web server. It might be Horrors, a Mac OS server, maybe a Linux server running Apache. Some people even use Windows with IIS. You're around here, Marnin, are you? I know he did for a long time. But then came the cloud. You didn't have to run your own servers. You could just write a big fat check each month, and then you could put your Munki repo in some server run by a big company that has your best interests at heart all the time. Anyway, yes, the cloud became a thing. So it was like people started thinking, can I put my Munki repo in the cloud? And Wade Robson, he wanted to host his Munki repo in AWS, specifically in an S3 bucket. And he developed an implementation of middleware. And middleware is a customizable way you can teach Munki how to talk to your cloud provider so that your clients can get manifests, catalogs, and packages. And this allowed Munki admins to use Amazon, Google, Azure, and other cloud providers to host their Munki repo. And I'm just curious, how many people here have their Munki repo in the cloud now? Almost half? At least a third? So you can thank Wade for that ability. And see, I personally didn't have a need for Munki in the cloud for a long time because, as I told you, all my users were in a single building. It just seemed like more work than it was worth, and plus, why would I want them to go outside and then come back in? And then about three years ago, this thing called COVID-19 happened, and all of our users went out of the building. They went home and stuff. And now the only way Munki would work for them is they'd have to VPN into the building. And we found that people were just getting behind on updates and stuff because there was a lot of services they could access without VPN. They could get to their email, they could get to certain other things, and so they didn't always use VPN. So it really helped. I decided this is the time. Let's move our Munki repo out into AWS, and now it's available no matter what network they're on. They don't have to connect into our internal Disney Animation Network. And so now their machines can be kept up to date. We can patch vulnerabilities, we can remove unneeded software, and we don't have to worry about them doing something special, just as long as they're on the internet. Another example, when Munki first came out, File Vault encrypted only the user's home directory. But when Apple released macOS Lion and File Vault 2, now File Vault encrypted the entire hard drive. And this presents some problems if Munki needs to reboot a machine after applying updates. Because normally when you reboot a machine with File Vault, it boots partway into that screen where they can unlock the disk. And when it's at that state, your management software isn't running, you can't SSH into the machine, you can't screen share into the machine. And if nobody's there to unlock the disk, after a while it just shuts down because it doesn't want to run the battery down, it doesn't want to run the machine too hot. So you could be in this situation where Munki does this update and now the machine needs somebody to actually go physically visit it. If you're running a lab or running conference rooms or something like that, that's a problem. And so Wesley Whetstone, he wanted Munki to be able to log out, install software, reboot the machine encrypted with File Vault without worrying whether they would become inaccessible after the reboot. And he wrote code that allowed a Munki admin to set up a File Vault authorized restart. And that's a way that you kind of pre-give it credentials so that it can restart and then continue all the way booting into the full OS afterwards. And that was Wesley's contribution. Now, as you probably know, the core Munki tools are command line tools. And even the tools that you use to manage a Munki repo are command line tools. And a very common request early on is, hey, is there going to be some sort of GUI to manage a Munki repo? Hannes Utiladian is a Mac admin working for a university in Finland. And he sent me an email in early 2010, and he mentioned he was working on a GUI for managing a Munki repo. And several months later, he sent me an early version to test and play around with. And so I did on my live production repo. It did not go well. And that was not Hannes's fault at all. It was totally my fault. But he had not tested with a repo of the size of mine, and so yeah, bad things happen. But I was able to recover from backups, and both Hannes and I learned important things from this experience. And later, when asking people to test an alpha release, Hannes made certain to remind people to be extra careful when testing. Yeah. But over the years, Munki Admin has matured into a really, really useful tool for Munki administrators. How many people here are using Munki Admin to manage their repo? Excellent, excellent. I'm sure Hannes would be very happy, or maybe not about that. It's like, oh, all these people I have to support. You never know. Another type of GUI is a web interface, and several people have written various web front ends or reporting consoles for Munki. One of the first web consoles was Jordan Rain's Munki on Rails, which was later renamed to Munki Server. And it not only provided a web front end, but it was also actually the server for a Munki repo. And later, Per Olofsson in Sweden created a web-based reporting console for Munki, which he called Munki Report. And this was really important because Munki native by itself does not handle any sort of reporting at all. It generates some report data, but it just sits there locally on the machine. And this was one of the first attempts to get that data off the machine and into some centralized view so you could take a look at what was going on in your fleet. And Per's Munki Report is long gone, but it inspired and influenced several other web-based tools for Munki, including Arjen van Baakhoven's Munki Report PHP and Graham Gilbert's SAL. And these two tools are probably the most common ways, I would say, that I've heard of for Munki admins to get reporting data from their clients. And if you haven't seen Munki Report, here's what it looks like. By the way, who's using Munki Report? Okay, quite a few people. And SAL, another one, who's using SAL? Okay, I use that too. So they're both really great additions to the Munki ecosystem, being able to have that sort of centralized view of what's going on with your clients. I don't know if this is super well known, but Google was a very important early adopter of Munki. And that was really validating to me that Munki was good enough to manage was probably the largest Mac deployment at the time. And I think the fact that a company like Google was using Munki encouraged other organizations that it was safe to take a look at it. Not just some goofy, GitHub project that might go away tomorrow, but hey, there might be something there. Maybe we should check that out. And the folks in the Google Mac Ops group were really important to that early development of Munki. This isn't all the people in the group, but Justin McWilliams, Ed Eigerman, Clay Cavanis, Ed Marzak, John Roundolph were all really involved early. And they submitted code and wrote tools, and they did tons of testing and feedback and bug fixes and code review and code sanitizing and linting. And in general, they just made it far more stable and far more professional than I would have been able to do at that time, especially by myself. And it makes sense that they were motivated to do that. They were running on a huge, huge fleet. And if there was a problem with 1% of their machines, that means over 1,000 Macs were having that problem. So they were very motivated to make sure Munki was stable and robust, and I thank them for that. And they were also responsible for the feature that enforces installs after a certain date and time. It was very important to them that their fleet get patched, and so that when there was a important update, they wanted to make sure that Munki helped enforce that by a certain time. And this turned out to be a really important Munki feature. They also developed an open source tool called Simian, which was another web application for managing a Munki repo and Munki clients. And so, yes, Google was a very, very important early adopter of Munki and heavily influenced its early development. And just the very fact that they used it, I think, gave it a respectability that it might not have gotten otherwise. So next, in my opinion, probably the most important component of the greater Munki ecosystem is AutoPackage. So if Munki automates the deployment of software to the Macs you manage, then AutoPackage automates the deployment of software to your Munki repo. So if you're like me and you first set up Munki, it's really exciting when you can get it to install that first piece of software. You have imported it, and look, it's going out to all machines. That's super exciting. Not so much when you've imported the latest version of Firefox for the 6 millionth time. It's very tedious, and you're like, God, I wish I had something that could just do this for me. This is boring stuff. Aren't computers good at automating the boring stuff? And I definitely found myself in that situation, so I looked around. There were actually several tools out there for automating reports or automating imports into a Munki repo, but I really liked what Per Olofsson had done at the time. So I started contributing to his AutoPackage project, and Tim Sutton joined a little bit later. And a few years after that, we got Nick and Elliot on board. And of course, and this is just as important, there are dozens and dozens of Mac admins out there writing AutoPackage recipes. AutoPackage would be useless without the recipes. So recipes, custom processors, and every day making AutoPackage just that much more valuable. Munki and AutoPackage is such a powerful combination. It enables Mac admins to keep a really large number of Macs up to date with very minimal day-to-day effort. Every morning, I get an email from my AutoPackage run telling me it's downloaded and imported several new updates. I didn't have to do anything, just it did it, right? I can't even imagine being a Munki admin without using AutoPackage. Just so much of the work is now done by a computer. And I assume who here is using AutoPackage? That's the largest number of hands so far. That's good. Very good. And if you're not using AutoPackage, really, you owe it to yourself to look into it. You're missing something. There's been a lot more over the years. So many talented Mac admins that contributed their time and knowledge and effort to improving Munki, writing additional tools, extending Munki, extending its capabilities. So what about the present? Let's take a look at what's new in the current major release of Munki and what's happening in the world of Munki today. Current release of Munki is version 6.3.2. So let's look at the major new features in Munki 6. Munki 6 added a new feature to assist with upgrading macOS on Apple Silicon Macs. The previous method that Munki used to upgrade Intel Macs doesn't work with Apple Silicon, because on Intel Macs, A root process can run the macOS installer from the command line, and it's fine. That's all it needs to be is root. On Apple Silicon, we need user credentials. And specifically, we need the credentials of a volume owner in order to make any changes. So all Apple updates, the point updates or full OS updates, you need to have the credentials of a volume owner. So the method that Munki was using wasn't going to work. So we needed a different approach. And this new feature in Munki 6 stages the macOS installer in the applications directory, temporarily adds admin rights to the user if needed. If they're not an admin currently, it will temporarily add those admin rights. And then it launches the macOS install application. And so the user can just upgrade their Mac the same way as if they had an unmanaged Mac at home. When the installer quits, if they were temporarily added those admin rights are removed, so they go back to being a standard user. That's that feature. Another new feature added in Munki 6.1 is default installs. And traditionally, there are two classes of software in a user's manifest or in a machine's manifest. The first is managed installs, and these items, the admin has decided a machine must have installed. The user has no control over these items, and the user cannot remove them if they don't actually use them or need them. There's also optional installs, and these are entirely under the user's control. They aren't installed unless the user chooses to install them, and the user has complete control and can remove them at any time. So it might be tempting to make as many things as possible optional installs. In fact, you might go, let's just make all our software optional installs. Don't install anything at the beginning, and just let users figure out what they want. That can really lead to a really poor new user experience. You got this new employee, they come into your organization, and they're eager to get to work the first day, and you give them this Mac, and before they can do anything at all, they got to download Office and Slack and Zoom and Chrome, and they're just thinking, what the hell does IT even do around here? But on the other hand, if you manage install everything, too much stuff, now the setup takes a really long time, and the users may have to deal with updates for software they don't even use. We've got bandwidth, we're pushing updates to software, and it's stuff they've never ever launched. So it felt like there needed to be sort of a middle ground, some way to get those initial installs in there, but let users then go, I don't need that. Let's yeet that out of here. See, that's a Pennsylvania word, yeet that out of here. So in my organization, I changed from a list of managed installs like this, where all the Office apps are installed, to this. So Word and Excel are installed by default, but now users can remove them if they desire, and they can optionally install other Microsoft Office apps if they want. And I'm sure to some people this seems kind of weird. Why wouldn't you install them all? We're not really a Microsoft shop. We're a Google Docs shop. We don't use Exchange. We don't use SharePoint. And so the actual heavy use, we don't have heavy use of Microsoft apps at all, but the most likely use would be Word and Excel. And I think this is also going to really help our bandwidth, because we were pushing down, a gigabyte of Outlook updates to all of our clients every single month, and most of our users don't use Outlook at all. And so those that have it now can remove it. All new users don't even get it. They can just choose it later. So I think it's nice that we're giving our users a lot more control over the software that they have, while we're still managing the updates, but they can kind of choose to go, I don't need that software at all. Just take it off my machine. And the nice thing about this is you can really easily transition from your current managed installs to default installs. It's just a matter of moving those items out of the managed installs list and into default installs and into optional installs. And you can do that on your existing clients. The next time Munki runs, now that software that had been installed for years, the user can choose to remove on their own. Next, I want to talk about the exciting world of TCC. TCC stands for Transparency, Consent, and Control, and it's the name of Apple's privacy protections. And these first showed up in macOS 10.9, which Mavericks, and Apple has gradually added additional protections in later releases of macOS. And you may also see the acronym some places PPPP, oh, too many P's, PPPC, which stands for Privacy Preferences Policy Control. And technically, that refers to the type of MDM configuration profile you use to manage TCC, but these terms all tend to get like thrown in a blender. So when you hear PPPC and TCC and all that, it all means the same thing. At first, TCC protected only a few areas inside users' home directories, but over time, Apple has added more and more and more stuff. And so currently in macOS Catalina, and I don't think there's been any huge changes in Sonoma, there's over 20 categories of TCC protections in the privacy and security settings. And in most cases, historically, these TCC protections didn't really affect Munki at all, unless you were using Munki to run scripts that affected things in user home directories or something like that. Not so when Ventura shipped. Ventura added a brand new TCC protection that can affect Munki and other management tools. And this new privacy protection limits what processes can modify, update, or delete application bundles. So items in the app management list are allowed to update or delete applications, but items not in that list might be prevented from doing that. So you might understand how that could cause a problem here, because Munki, which is a tool to install, update, and remove software, might have problems if there's a protection against things updating and removing software. And for reasons I don't completely understand, we actually haven't seen a lot of problems caused by this. Munki was able, my early testing on Ventura, Munki was able to basically install virtually everything and update it, remove it, no problem. But in some circumstances, you can get into situations where Munki is prevented from updating or installing software. And when it causes a failure, if you look in the install logs, you see something like this. Installer is logging about an unexpected error occurred while moving files to the final destination. You'll also see something called this error, operation not permitted. And when you see that error in most contexts, the first thing you should be looking at is TCC. Because you see operation not permitted and you think, oh, POSIX permissions. It's almost certainly not that. It's almost certainly one of Apple's, custom vendor protections. Could be TCC, it could be some other SIP or gatekeeper type thing, but it's generally not POSIX permissions. In this case, it definitely is TCC related. So let's summarize here. Admins rely on Munki to be able to update and remove software, so this new protection could be a problem. So what do we do about it? We need to give Munki the TCC rights to make the needed changes. We can, in theory, create and deliver an MDM PPPC profile to manage those rights. And you might decide to give Munki app management rights, or you just decide, hey, let's just go whole hog, let's give Munki full disk access. And some advantages of going all the way to full disk access is you could install that configuration profile on machines that aren't running Ventura yet. I'm having this talk a little late in the cycle here, but you might still have machines that are running Monterey or even Big Sur, and you could install a profile that enables full disk access now. If you installed a profile that enabled app management on those machines, those operating systems don't know anything about that, and when the machine gets updated to Ventura or Sonoma later, it doesn't get reevaluated. It's completely ignored. This is a fundamental problem with MDM profiles, is that they're only evaluated at the time they're installed, and then if things change, they're not. So if you've got sort of a mixed environment, or you've got other things that Munki might be doing other than strictly application bundles, think about granting it full disk access rather than app management. But what specific part of Munki should get those additional rights? And your first thought is, well, I'll just give it to Managed Software Center. That's an application. Okay, they'll give it the rights. That's not going to work because Managed Software Center doesn't do the actual installs and removals. The actual installs and removals are done by the command line tool Managed Software Update. Okay, great. Let's give Managed Software Update those TCC permissions. Whoops, Munki command line tools are written in Python. So this is a Python script. You can't give TCC permissions to a script. You have to give them to a binary or an application. Okay, well, MonkePython is running this. MonkePython is a binary. let's give MonkePython those rights. Ah, but that's a little dangerous, right? Now you've given anything that could be using MonkePython those rights. And since Munki's used in a lot of organizations, if I'm an attacker, I look, oh, hey, look, they've got MonkePython. Oh, they probably gave it TCC permissions. Okay, I'm going to use that as an exploit and get it. So that's a little broad. It would probably work, but it would be better if we could narrow it down, if we could give TCC permissions only to managed software update. So how do we do that, even though managed software update is a script? What if we had a small compiled wrapper, a binary tool, that called managed software update? And what if we signed that tool and we gave TC permissions to that? I was pretty certain that was going to work, and that we'd be able to use a compiled binary as a wrapper to call the Python script and sign that. I'd already solved this problem internally for autopackage. Our Munki repo, at least the internal version of our Munki repo, is out on NFS storage. And when we upgraded my machine that runs autopackage to, I think, Catalina, one of the new protections was network volumes. And so now autopackage couldn't access the Munki repo, which was out on network storage. So I went through the same mental gymnastics we just talked about here, and I wrote a little tool which I called Voodoo. You can figure out what that stands for. And I gave it the TCC permissions to allow it to write to or to access network volumes. That tool in turn called my autopackage run script, and so now autopackage could access that network volume. So, okay, we figured this out. Should be able to do the same thing with Munki. And I and other Munki admins spent months in late 2022, testing various versions of that idea. And it kind of sort of worked some of the time, but there were failures. It didn't always work 100% of the time, and it was getting very, very frustrated. But in January of this year, Corey Prince contacted me on the Mac admin Slack, and he was asking me questions about this problem, and we were talking about it back and forth. And after I was chatting with him for a while, it became really clear that he'd done way more research and knew way more about TCC and responsible processes than I did. And he pointed me at this web page, and it had some information about TCC I'd never seen before. And some of this new, to me, information turned out to be the key to making the wrapper work for all the contexts managed software update might be called in. And even better, Corey wrote and actually contributed an implementation of this improved wrapper. And Per Olofsson contributed some code and some ideas as well. And we kind of iterated back and forth, tested it, and the result of our combined efforts is something we call the Munki shim wrapper. But we were even more clever than that. When we install it, we actually install this Munki shim wrapper under the name Managed Software Update. So all existing code calls this wrapper without even knowing it's calling the wrapper, because it's the exact same path that the previous Managed Software Update tool used to be at. This wrapper then in turn calls MonkePython and runs the Managed Software Update script. So problem solved. We've got a tool that we can give those rights to. And Munki 6.3 shipped with this wrapper implementation, and we now have a binary that you can give TCC permissions to. But Munki admins were still on their own to actually sign that code. They needed to sign it with a developer ID so they could create a PPPC profile. And I didn't want to sign it with my personal developer ID. I didn't want somebody working at your company calling me up and saying, why is this software by Greg Neagle sitting on my machine? What nefarious thing is it doing? And I didn't bother asking Disney Animation if they wanted to do that with an organizational certificate for the same reason. Disney Animation doesn't want to be held responsible for management software on Uber's Macs. So my suggestion was that, hey, if this is important to you, you should get a developer certificate and you should sign that wrapper yourself. And that's a perfectly valid thing to do, but it is a non-zero effort thing to do. It's not everybody is set up so that they already have one of those, or maybe the organization is pretty small and they don't want to do that. But fortunately, my friends in the Mac Admins open source team came up with an alternative. And Nate Walk and Eric Gomez, as part of the Mac Admins open source team, are making signed and notarized builds of the Munki tools available here. That's the Mac Admins open source site. And these builds are done via GitHub Actions and make use of the Munki build scripts improved by Eric to support proper signing and notarization. A lot of work done by both of those guys, and it's really appreciated. So now you can just download a build from the Mac Admins open source site, create an MDM PPPC profile that references a stable signing identity to grant the managed software update binary app management rights. Got that? Just a lot of words all strung together. Hopefully it means something. So I want to revisit commercial adoption for a moment. And last week there was some news that made me smile a little bit. Jamf announced the acquisition of DataJar, which is a managed services provider here in the UK. Some people may know Ben Toms. He's presented here in the past. He's also presented at JNUC. He's one of the key people in DataJar. And DataJar, largely through the effort of Ben Toms, created this thing called JamJar, which automates application updates by using Munki. So their managed customers, they're deploying both Jamf and Munki to their managed customers to keep their Macs up to date. So if Jamf owns DataJar, and DataJar ships JamJar, which ships Munki, can I now say that Jamf is yet another commercial vendor that is including Munki as part of their offerings? Yes, I can say that. Jamf may disagree, but I can say that. And there's one more thing that's happened recently. One reason it became okay for the Mac Admins open source group to sign Munki is that the Walt Disney Animation Studios is no longer asserting control of the Munki project. Munki is now free. And free not as in beer, but free as in free-range chickens. So Disney's not going to control it. And this is something that I wanted, something I've been asking for, and something that I finally got buy-off on a few months ago. So what does it mean, really? It really just an acknowledgement of what's already the case. Disney Animation Studios has provided certain resources to work on Munki, and but they haven't really been hands-on managers of the project. You know, they don't really have a vested interest in it deeply. We don't use it to make our films. So nothing's really going to change. I will continue to work on Munki, but now we can bring in additional maintainers and people, and I don't have to ask for permission from people at Disney Animation. So this is a good thing for the future of Munki, being able to just open this up to the wider world and not worry about, you know, what some lawyer at Disney thinks about that. We don't have to have that anymore. And that brings us to the future. And we could talk a little bit about the technical future of Munki. Here you can see a few things I know will happen in the future, a few things that could happen in the future. But I want to hear your ideas about Munki's technical future. You know, I want to hear from the community where Munki needs to go in the future. And I'm mostly interested in the organizational future of Munki. Who will be working on Munki in the future? I mean, even GitHub is not happy there's only one owner for the Munki project. I mean, we need to identify at least one more person to be an owner in case I get hit by a bus. People were worried about that yesterday when we were getting on the bus to... and then there was somebody was actually saying, well, what if he gets hit by the lottery bus? Since the lottery is up to like $1 billion and that sort of thing. You know, win and bye, I'm going to Fiji. But now that Disney Animation isn't actively controlling the project, it'll be much easier to add people as maintainers. So let's make that a future goal. And in a similar vein, I really want to develop and recognize more people as maintainers. And how is this going to happen? I don't know. This is all new. We're figuring this out as we go. It'll happen slowly, gradually. And again, I want to hear feedback from the community how we should go with this. So I'm asking for help, right? And some of you are thinking, I don't know, but if this is you, I do have some ideas. I mean, Munki has an extensive wiki with lots of useful information. Is it organized as well as it could be? No. New stuff has been added over time. Old stuff's still sitting there that could probably be deleted because it's just not relevant and confusing. It really needs to be cleaned up and organized. And if you aren't comfortable with coding, but you can write documentation, perfect place to help. Another place you can help the Munki community is by just helping other users. The Munki Discuss Google group has 650 members, but the Mac Admin Slack Munki channel has nearly 4,600 members. Surprisingly, neither is actually super busy with questions. The questions come in occasionally, but any help is appreciated. So if somebody asks a question and you know the answer, chime in, help them out. A lot of times the answer is in the wiki, and people just need help finding that. So point them to where they can find it in the wiki. And it's super important to have people with different setups and different configurations. You know, I don't use Azure where I work, so I can't help people with questions about putting their Munki repo in the Azure cloud. But if that's you, if your organization does that, maybe you can help with that. And you know, same thing with specific pieces of software. I don't install every piece of software known to man. There's lots of software that some other organization may have that I don't have. So I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't answer all the questions. So let's add those goals to our list and think about, is there anything else you could help with in the community? And I have a few more specific suggestions for Munki-related projects people could work on. Let's go back to the wiki for a second. And in case you're not familiar, the wiki is the online documentation for Munki. And Munki's wiki is pretty good at helping people get started. There's a clearly named Getting Started page that leads you to a demonstration setup. Let's see, will it go to that? There we go. Where you can set up a fully functional Munki server on any Mac, and you can play with Munki, get a basic idea how it works, update a client or two. But then once you do that, what do you do next? I mean, the current information in the wiki on the next steps is pretty vague and hand-wavy. It's really a lot like this helpful guide to teach you how to draw an owl. So, the wiki could really benefit from some more concrete advice on setting up a real production Munki repo. And there are many ways to do that, so there might be room for many people's takes on that. Setting up a Munki repo on a Linux server, setting up on a repo on Windows IIS, setting up a repo in AWS. And equally important, how to then populate that repo in a useful way. How should you organize your manifests? What's the best way to keep the software in the repo updated? Auto package. But let's teach people how to draw their own owl. Munki Web Admin is another bit of the Munki ecosystem that could use some love. If you haven't seen it, it's a web interface for managing a Munki repo, and you can create and edit manifests, edit package info files, and it really hasn't been updated for almost 3 years. It's still written in Python 2. Still works fine. You can spin up a Linux VM, install Python 2.7. You can get it running. But it really should be updated. Python 2 has been end of life for over 3 years now. And Chris Grande actually did a lot of work on a Python 3 migration a few years ago, but was never merged into the main MWA2 repo. And that's probably entirely my fault. But perhaps we can help Chris finish that up, or help me get it tested and merged, and so we can get Python 3 compatibility into MWA2. Yes, we do need to move to Python 3, but there are many, many other components of Munki Admin that are way out of date. And so some of these have fallen out of favor and maybe should be replaced. I've gotten a GitHub alert. One of these components has got known vulnerabilities. I won't tell you which one. But not all this needs to be updated at once. This is something that can be done gradually over time. Munki Package needs a bit of help. Munki Package is a tool that helps you build packages in a repeatable way, and you can store the projects on GitHub or in a Git repo. And it's not actually tied to Munki. You can use Munki Package to build packages for other things, but it is very useful with Munki, especially for internal tools you may have. And among other things, Munki Package supports signing and notarizing packages. In most cases, Munki itself doesn't need signed or notarized packages, but you might use those features if you're using Munki Package to build packages for other contexts. Packages that people might manually install, or packages that you have to upload to an MDM or that sort of thing. And Mikhail Moravec from the Czech Republic, he did the work to add support for notarization, and his code makes use of a command line tool from Apple known as AL tool. But Apple has since deprecated AL tool for notarizing, And they're telling us to use a new tool called Notary Tool for this purpose. And AL Tool will stop working for notarization this fall. So Sterling Anderson has submitted a pull request containing code to switch to using Notarization Tool. But since I don't actually use the signing and notarization features myself, I really haven't found the time or, frankly, the motivation to test this new code. I've merged it to a Notarization Tool branch, and people can test it, and we can maybe iterate on it and figure out how do we help people migrate from a project that was using AL Tool to a project that's using Notarization Tool. And we will eventually merge it to the main branch. So if you use Munki package and you need to notarize packages, please look at this. We only have a few months before Apple breaks using AL Tool to notarize, and it would be really nice to get this, solid and ready to go before that happens. So those are a few projects that maybe you could help out with, and I'm sure there's more. A lot of people have helped make Munki what it is today, and this is not all of them. And I hope I've convinced you that Munki has always been a team effort and that Munki's future depends on that team. Will you join us? Thank you for listening today. We've got 9 minutes for questions and answers. Oh, all right. There you go.
You mentioned. Wait a minute.
I'm not hearing it. I want to hear it. Turn the volume up. And for those of you who didn't fall for it, this is a Rickroll.
Is it really?
Yes.
Nice. You mentioned that Disney has
That's the real one.
Disney has kind of ceded control of the Munki project in a legal sense, I guess.
Yeah.
But you also, I seem to remember a long time ago, you mentioned that Munki package was named that way in order to kind of fall under the umbrella of what Disney would control. Now that they're no longer, claiming that control, I wonder if you're planning on renaming or de-obfuscating the name Munki package.
I'm not planning that. I could see why you might ask that. It is not necessarily a goal of mine to increase the support burden by getting lots more people to use it. So if if people are using it now, great. And if some people are scared away from it because it has the word Munki in it, and that's probably okay. It's not that important to me that go out there. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of things that I put underneath the Munki organization that were maybe only tangentially related to Munki, because then I wouldn't have to go back and ask, hey, can I put this tool in open source? Because I knew that was going to be a pain. I did do one other tool other than Munki, Reposado, if anybody used that for a while. And that did go through the formal approval process. And it wasn't horrible, but it was still more than zero. And I wanted to avoid doing that all the time for every little tool I wanted to share. So I was like, oh, I'll just stick it under Munki. And, if I could even, plausibly say it was related to Munki, I could, just put it under there. And again, if ask for forgiveness later if anybody came and asked me, hey, why is this open source? No one ever has. And no Disney lawyers are going to watch this presentation because it's super boring. So I'm hoping. So they won't find out. Any other questions? Oh, Nate.
So one of the things I've been wondering for a while was the whole Munki shim business, right? Like, if Munki had been at this point rewritten into Swift, that probably would have been a little less painful.
Yeah.
So I noticed on one of your slides you mentioned it, and like you, I learned by doing kind of thing. So I'm curious where your level of, I guess, commitment is to potentially rewriting Munki in Swift.
My personal commitment to rewriting Munki in Swift is low.
Okay.
My theoretical organizational commitment to it is pretty high. In other words, I would like to see it happen. I just don't want to say I'm going to do it all by myself. It took me quite a long time to rewrite Managed Software Center in Swift. And at the time, I kind of like figured out, you know, how many lines of Python code I used, you know, that got replaced when I rewrote Managed Software Center, and then projected that for the code base for the rest of Munki, and realized it was going to take me well over a year, 2 years or more, to rewrite all of the rest of Munki in Swift. And you know, I'm not sure I trust Apple long enough to, you know, I don't want to be, hey, I did all this work, and then Apple drops, you know, Mac OS 16, and it, you know, it completely breaks all external tools. The only way now you can install software is via, you know, DDM or something like that, which is not impossible to imagine. So I feel, you know, kind of conflicted. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but is it worth the time and effort? And you know, if we spread that work out among a larger number of people, then everybody only gets hurt a little bit when Apple pulls the rug out from under us, right? But yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. So it's at least worth the conversation to.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to follow up to that and just ask what the modularity is that we could do a small portion of Munki and release that and then keep on doing that towards Swift.
That would be a very ideal way to do it. I mean, Munki definitely, there is no tool named Munki, right? There's Managed Software Update, and there's, you know, make package info and make catalogs, and there's a whole bunch of, lots of little tools. We could take any one of those tools, rewrite it in Swift, take the lessons we learned, write another tool. Yeah, it could be done piecemeal over time. The big win, of course, is to get Managed Software Update, the core tool rewritten in Swift. That will be the longest and hardest thing to do. If you've rewritten, you know, Munki import in Swift, that's great, but it really doesn't help with any of these deployment issues that we might run into. But it would still be valuable as a learning lesson to get better at Swift and figuring out how to port the code and that sort of thing before jumping in the deep end and doing the big enchilada.
One of the big differences between the kind of Unix philosophy and the commercial turnkey philosophy is the idea of training and certification. I wonder if having some kind of a semi-official Munki curriculum for people, other than just what's on the wiki, is something that has some merit, or is that just creating bureaucracy where it doesn't need to be?
I think that would be a great idea. I wouldn't want to do it myself. For a while, there was a company in the UK, AMSYS, that was offering Munki training, and I don't know if they actually called it certification, because, you know, how can you, what does that mean? I don't know what certification means for most software products. You know, it's just money that the vendor gets from you, so you can get a piece of paper. But they were definitely doing training, and I don't think they do that any longer. But no, I think it's a great idea. It's just not something that I personally have the bandwidth to build, you know, that sort of thing. But if the community thought, hey, we could put together some Munki training classes, that, you know, would be fantastic. I'd support that 100%. Elliot, back here, can you throw that?
Yep.
Good toss. This is really not a tech question, and so I'm sorry if this bores everyone. But I'm curious, I mean, where is your bandwidth shared amongst other projects that are not Munki? I mean, Munki fits into your workload, obviously, but what other things are you doing? I'm just curious. I mean, what do you do? What do you do outside of Munki? What do you do at Disney? What do you do for fun? And this is not an interview, by the way.
So I'm one of the members. We only have 45 seconds here, so I probably want to take this offline. But I help manage Linux machines at Disney Animation. I write other internal tools for Disney Animation that I have not released as open source. You know, they're only internal. For fun, I ride my bike in the morning when I get up. Go ride around the hills in the Pasadena, California area. I teach Taekwondo to little kids. Not a lot. I'm like sort of a fill-in instructor. I know, is that fun? It can be. It can also be. Yeah, and I'd be happy to go into more detail, offline. Again, time's up. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Go have some lunch.